Many people have asked me, what was it like living in Yellowknife? So I decided to make this video. This will not answer everyone's questions, and I only lived there for 7.5 months, so this video is what it is. I moved to Yellowknife in November 2018 to work as a video journalist. Before that, I was doing the same job in Halifax. I've wanted to report in the North for years. The climate seemed intense, there were lots of different cultures to explore, I wanted to learn more about Indigenous self-governments, among other draws. I did not have much notice for the job, so it was a bit of a mad dash to get everything done in time. Moving to Yellowknife was quite costly. I did not have time to drive there, so I had to pay nearly $3,000 for a company to transport my car. Including some new winter attire, the plane ticket, and other expenses, I spent probably around $5,000 on the move. So it was back to living paycheck to paycheck. It's worth noting that I was able to claim many moving expenses when I filed my taxes. I arrived on my steely steed late at night. Voila, the first time I stepped foot in the Northwest Territories. I've done this type of thing before, moving somewhere I've never visited. That happened when I moved to Regina, Halifax, Whitehorse. Oh yeah, I live in Whitehorse right now, but that's a video for another day. I didn't have my car there right away, so I relied on walking or taking public transit for a month. Speaking of public transit, I think the highlight was every now and then getting to ride this bus, which was pretty neat. It felt more like a school bus. Getting around town wasn't an issue, but finding a place, oof. I tried websites that host classifieds and such, no luck. I resorted to literally asking random people I came across for apartment leads. In the end, I found a one-bedroom apartment through a property management company's website, and I signed a lease. As for the cost, part of me does not want to admit this, but I will, $2,000 a month, not including electricity, parking, or internet. That was more than double what I paid in Halifax. Now, there were some benefits. It included a gym, so no paying for a membership. It was right downtown, so I did not have to use my car much. I could also walk to work or take the bus nearby. It was furnished, which was terrific because I found furniture to be quite expensive in the city. Also, the landlord allowed me to switch to a month-to-month contract early on, which was helpful considering how often I move. The biggest selling point, it was the only suitable place I could find at the time. I did not have much of a choice. My roommates were a little weird, not going to lie, but hey, the place came with some free soap. The North is known for having some of the highest rents in Canada. It felt like everything was more expensive in the region, to be honest. In Halifax, I paid $110 a month with tax for an unlimited home internet plan. In Yellowknife, at the time, I paid $240 before tax for a plan with a limit of 500 gigabytes a month. When buying items online, the shipping costs alone were sometimes as expensive as the products. I had to shop around quite a bit. Many people in the North sometimes fly to the South just to buy stuff and bring it back. Food prices were also higher in Yellowknife, but at least for the stuff I purchased, they weren't drastically higher. The extreme prices are usually found in the more isolated communities in the North. Also, it was sometimes challenging to find certain fruits and vegetables that were still fresh. I'm quite frugal, so that helped, but financially it was a difficult time for me. So, the weather. I was wondering when you would ask. Yes, it can get extremely cold, minus 40 degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit cold, and colder. But having survived 2 winters in Regina and just generally tolerating the cold, I'd say better than most people, Yellowknife's climate was not much of a shock. I would sometimes walk 1.5 kilometers to work in minus 40 weather and work outside in that weather. I added more layers to stay warm, I avoided facing the wind, I adapted. The beauty of the cold is if you get too hot, you remove a layer and move on. I got quite used to the cold, so much so minus 25 and warmer was pretty much a cakewalk. Downtown, the sidewalks were usually cleared of snow within a day or two, I found, but there were areas with an inch or so of ice and snow for the entire season, still walkable though. These 2 photos were taken on May 29th. Something I find quaint is the way people in the city refer to temperatures during the winter. A colleague once told me something along the lines of, "Wow, it's going to be 12 on the weekend." I was like, huh? Because it was definitely not going to be 12 degrees. But see, it's so cold in Yellowknife that the minus part, minus 12, is implicit. For many people, the bigger issue during the winter is the lack of sunlight. For part of the year, I arrived at work before the sun was up and left after the sun was already down. During the winter, many people make sure to go on walks during their lunch break to get a little sun. For a lot of the spring and the summer, the opposite situation. That's the sun at 11:31 p.m. Even when the sun does go down, there is still twilight, and then a few hours later, the sun is up. So it doesn't really get dark, at least for that part of the year. It fascinates me. The warmer months really change the city. People hike, swim, walk around, party late into the night. I mean, this happens elsewhere, but it seemed more pronounced here. Also, it was a little odd to see families with small children just walking around downtown at 11 p.m. Speaking of light, I have to mention the northern lights, of course. They can be hard to see when it's cloudy, they're much harder to distinguish when there is a lot of sunlight, and many photographers definitely up the contrast when they post photos, myself included. But when they are visible, they can put on a remarkable display. They swirl, dance as people say, and come in different hues. I remember once seeing the lights covering so much of the sky. It was one of the most incredible moments I've witnessed. A lot of tourists travel to Yellowknife to see the lights. While the lights can be seen in the city, getting away from Yellowknife's artificial light is a good idea. A 10-minute drive on the Ingram Trail was usually sufficient. Yellowknife has other draws. There are the usual events, the Santa Claus Parade, New Year's Eve fireworks and such. The festival on Franklin was notable to me because of how many people showed up, the variety of food offered by vendors, and the atmosphere. There is a movie theater. It was cash only, at least when I was there, and that's also where I happened to get my first Viola Desmond $10 bill. A lot of people go camping, fishing, hiking, and swimming. Be aware that there are wolves and bears in the Yellowknife area and elsewhere in the territory. Along the Ingram Trail, there are several places to hike, and yeah, the mosquitoes were as intense as people warned me about. There are the seasonal staples, cross-country skiing, snowboarding, and such. The so-called Yellowknife ice caves were a little hard to find, but neat to check out. The annual Snow Kings Winter Festival, which included a snow castle built on Yellowknife Bay, was quite the sight. There was a slide, live music, and other things inside. The ice road that connects to Yellowknife's east end is another major draw, though a bit terrifying for some. I spent a little more than 3 weeks in Hay River. It's a town roughly a 5-hour drive south. It felt like a mini Yellowknife, but it had its own character, and I felt more of an emphasis on community. Groceries were a bit more expensive there than in Yellowknife. I think it was the first time I've lived in a home that required water to be trucked in. That was interesting. I enjoyed walking around downtown, discovering businesses, and getting to chat with different people. There are a couple of ice roads, and a 30-minute drive away, Alexandra Falls. Back to Yellowknife and out of Yellowknife, I moved out of the city and the territory altogether in July 2019. I left to do the same job, but in Yukon. I was a bit sad to leave because I wanted to explore more of the territory, especially the northern half, but I was ready for a new adventure. Yellowknife doesn't have some of the major challenges associated with life in the north, at least not the ones on the same level elsewhere. I mean, it's not a fly-in community with no hospital for hundreds of kilometers. There is, relatively speaking, a lot of access to the basics found in the south. Still, it provides a good taste of what life is like in the north. It's a bit of a hub. I feel privileged to have been a Northwest Territorian. I go with that demonym anyway. My job allowed me to meet a lot of people, including many from elsewhere in the territory. I learned a lot, and I left feeling accomplished.